I walked back inside the reinforced garage that I designed with first divine metal, and I even reinforced all the windows and doors with first divine metal so nothing could get through it. And when I came back inside, the girls asked me what happened. We heard a gunshot, and then I said it was nothing girls, I just had to scare off a crazy person, that's all. And then I showed them my new gun that looked like something out of a old western movie, and then Dawn said, oh cool, that's so awesome, and that's a big gun you've got there, big boy, she said, like some sort of sexual innuendo. And then she asked me could I hold your big gun, and then I smiled warmly and I said you can hold more than that, but be careful because my big gun is dangerous. And then she grabbed the handle of the gun and I said careful, don't put your finger on the trigger because it's very sensitive and it's very powerful. And that comment was literally the understatement of the century because that gun has the powers to punch bullets through a planet and kill almost every kind of celestial being. And then I said careful Dawn, it has a hair trigger. And then she said I can probably handle the trigger very well. And then I said please give it back, and I also need to ask you favor, could you please help me clean those sheets and blankets on that bed because it's not my bed, it's Kate Beckinsale's bed. And there's also a very nice washer and dryer in here, and there's also a very nice shower room down the hall, and it also has a hot tub and a steam room. And then she said oh that's it, I want to live here, Dawn said. And then Vicky Hayes said I'll race you. And then Dawn handed me back my gun the right way and she said here you go cowboy. And then I said in a southern cowboy accent thank you ma'am, and she said I'm impressed, can you do other impressions like that? And then I did a British butler accent and I said at your service madam, and I said this all while I was naked again. And she raised an eyebrow and said you should join us. And then I went and I took a shower with all 3 women and I had sex with them again for many days. And since I bought a lot of pizza the previous day, the girls had plenty of food to eat. And then I said this is not my home, so if you girls want to come live with me you can, I'm a rich billionaire and I also live with 3 other women and me and Kate Beckinsale are currently dating. And then all the girls except for Dawn, they got a little upset when I said that. And then I said I never said I was single ladies, you all just assumed that I probably was, but really it should be no surprise to you all considering how well I had sex with all of you. And then Victoria Hayes said oh shit, my sister, I forgot about her. And then Dawn laughed and started giggling and she said I'm actually glad we both came in here now because this is the best thing that ever happened to us. And then they asked me do you have a car, and then I said yes ma'am, of course I do. And then they both took me to meet Victoria Hayes' sister, and Vicky Hayes introduced me as her and Dawn's new boyfriend. And then she said he's very handsome and muscular, I can understand why you two would want to be with him. And then I smiled warmly at Tara Hayes and I said don't worry, your sister will always be in good hands with me and I will always protect her, you have nothing to worry about, and I intend to marry your sister and Dawn. And she asked me who's this other woman, and then Denise said oh my name is Denise, but people just called me the cat lady because I can make cat sounds really well. And then Tara Hayes asked her really do those sounds now please, and then Denise started doing cat sounds really well. And then Tara Hayes said wow that's so cool, you can do it perfectly, I actually felt like I heard a cat's voice. And then Dawn and Vicky said that's not all, he can do funny impressions of people with different accents. And then Tara Hayes, she looked at me like a little kid and she said please do that. And then I did my funniest accent, the Crocodile Steve accent, and she laughed so hard and it warmed my heart to see all these people so happy compared to what would have happened in the original storyline had I not been here to save them. And then Tara Hayes grabbed my arm and she said you must stay for dinner and do more of those accents please. And then Tara Hayes said I actually tried ringing the doorbell on that nice house, but when no one answered the door I assumed no one was home. And then Vicky Hayes and Dawn blushed and smiled at me warmly. And then Dawn said you can blame this handsome man over here, we were very busy last night. And then Tara Hayes blushed awkwardly and laughed awkwardly and she said oh I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you all might be having sex with him at the same time. And then Dawn said we did and we enjoyed every second of it and it was absolutely wonderful and we are all still very sore. And then Tara Hayes blushed almost as red as a tomato and she said excuse me please, I have to put the dishes up.